Hello students, this is Professor McDonald, and this will be my professor comments for Chapter 10. The title of this chapter is Missing and Exploited Persons. When we talk about reports of missing persons, those are one of the more common types of investigations that are conducted by law enforcement agency, primarily at the state and local level, even though the federal agencies do get involved at some point, in particular if we're dealing with kidnapping cases or with human trafficking. The response to these cases is guided by a number of factors. The key factors are the person's age, risk factors that might apply to that person, and what kind of risk factors are we talking about? We're talking about, in addition to age, maybe their mental capacity, things of this nature, and any suspicious circumstances that may be involved in the disappearance. Now, abductions can occur at all ages. Infant abductions occur rather infrequently, and when they do occur, they're usually planned and carried out by a woman who's trying to replace an infant she may have lost. Missing children between the ages of 6 months and 13 years, they fall into three categories normally. Lost or injured, family abductions. When we're talking about family abductions, we're talking about when one member of the family takes or keeps a child away from another family member, normally in violation of the person's custodial rights. So this could be a family that's going through a divorce and there's a dispute about who's going to maintain custody of the children. And so what happens is the parents, they end up using the children as tools for retaliation and manipulation against the other parent. Missing teenagers represent the most common missing children case, and it's estimated in our textbook, they talk about in the United States about 450,000 teenage runaways are reported each year, and some of them are multiple offenders. And then we also have missing adults. Now the thing about adults is they're free to leave home whenever they want, and so the vast majority of them do return home. But there are occasions when a missing adult case does become an investigation that perhaps could involve foul play. Another thing we'll talk about in this chapter, we'll talk about a number of types of exploited persons. Human trafficking being number one. It's the modern day form of slavery. All right, so let's talk again about missing children, and again about 325,000 children. And when we're talking about children, we're talking about between the ages of 6 months to 13 years of age. If they're less than that, then they're considered an infant. Now, other than the family abductions, which I've already spoke about briefly, and of course, when a family member is involved in an abduction, one of the key investigative leads that needs to be followed up is, of course, the National Crime Information Center should be contacted normally within 2 hours and a missing person file initiated on the child. In this way, if the person is stopped by the police and if somebody finds the child and makes an inquiry into the system, there'll be an entry that shows that this child has been abducted. We also have the Amber Alert system that informs the public of a vehicle, identification, suspect information, direction of travel, those sort of broadcasts that have been very useful. And if a family abduction actually becomes a violation of federal law if the abduction crosses state lines, or if the child's been removed from the country. So the FBI has primary jurisdiction on kidnapping cases that cross state lines, and if we get involved in an abduction out of the country, and these do occur, the U.S. Department of State, they don't mention it in the book, but it would be the Diplomatic Security Service, which is a federal law enforcement agency at the Department of State. They would be involved in that investigation, trying to work with our foreign allies. But those type of kidnappings do occur. And of course, non-family abductions, those are the most dangerous. Those normally happen with use of force, persuasion, threat of harm by a person who's not related to the family. And of course, the focus of the investigation is the recovery of the child. And if it is a non-family abduction, it does appear to be high risk factors involved, and this is a high priority investigation for the criminal investigators. What are some of the risk factors? The age of the child. Does the child have any mental or behavioral disabilities? Is the child on medication? How much time has expired since the time the child is reported missing? And any other factors that could engage or could involve that could involve why the child is missing and some of the factors that could help the investigators identify where this child might be located. When it comes to missing teenagers, again, that's ages 13 to 17. A lot of times they do voluntarily run away, but then they're at great risk when they're living on the street. And I've seen this in some of the cities I've worked with where they have large. When I was in Portland, Oregon, there was a large, we call them runaways, but there was a large runaway cadre of teenagers that lived on the streets there. And which creates a lot of social issues too for a city itself. How would you investigate this sort of thing? Obviously, you're going to file a missing report. You're going to interview the parents or the guardians. You want to check, do all the things that you would think you would do. Check their voicemails. Check their, have the parents check their inboxes for emails and see if the child has reached out to them. If there's nothing that indicates that the child has not run away, then you have to proceed as a missing person. You want to get a photo of that child. You want to get samples of the DNA. You want to get permission from the family dentist. In the worst possible scenario, if dental records are at some point needed to identify a potential victim. Obviously, the family member should be interviewed to see if there's any indication that something like this could happen. Behavioral changes, doing poorly in school, other issues, personal issues. You want to examine their diaries if they maintain them. If they have a computer, you'd want to search the computer, see if they've developed any friendships on the internet. That seems to be a rising threat to young people, being befriended by sexual predators on the internet. Interview the children of the missing person, simply because their friends, interview their friends, because a lot of times their friends might know more than the family as to why this person is leaving and where they may be going. And when a teenager like this is located, you want to separate them from the family and do the interview. And the reason is you really want to, you want to know, you want them to be candid with you as to why they ran away, and without that parental pressure being in the room with you. That way you hopefully will get to the truth of the case. And of course, you have to worry about, with runaway teenagers, the sexual exploitation of the child. By pimps, by sex traffickers. They use drugs, they use psychological manipulation, threats of violence to keep these individuals under their control. Many of the techniques I talked about with missing children, you can also do that with adults. And again, this is over the age of 18. Again, they're free to leave home. Sometimes you have adults that have mental issues that wander away, and these are particularly vulnerable adults if they're on medication, or maybe they're suffering from dementia and other mental issues, mental disease. And so it's real important to try to locate these people quickly, or they can end up becoming victims. Many times with adults, you really don't know, there is no clear indication as to why they left, but you need to get the basic facts. Obviously, interview all the individuals at the home, obtain pictures, DNA, all the things that I just mentioned with adults as well. Some adults would be more at risk than other adults. Exploited persons. Human trafficking basically is the modern form of slavery. I've already mentioned that. The exploitation of human beings for profit. It's estimated that in the United States alone, approximately 50,000 adults and children are trafficked into this country annually. Many are lured by promise of good working conditions, high pay, and then once they're brought into the country, if they're from overseas, they take their passports away from them. Sometimes they hook them on drugs. Sometimes they're under a constant threat, not only to their own well-being, but to their families if they come from another country. If you don't do what we tell you, we'll harm your family back home. Many times there's language issues, and so that fear is what keeps these individuals under the control of the traffickers. It's a very profitable business, and it's illegal. I mean, the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution outlawed involuntary servitude, so they could be used for sex trafficking, forced labor, bonded labor, domestic servitude. Research has shown that about 80% of the incidents of human trafficking involve sex trafficking, and about 10% were classified as labor trafficking. And the remaining 10% involve incidents of purchasing mail-order brides and selling children, etc. These are high-profile investigations. We actually have a class that's taught at UNCP in our department on human trafficking, and I would highly encourage you to take that class if you do, because if you do work at the local, state, and federal level in criminal justice position, you will engage in this. This is not strictly a federal problem. This goes down to the local and state level as well. What kind of investigative leads? Obviously, if it's a minor, they're being involved in sexual activities, being exploited. Normally not one single lead is going to verify this, but when you get into the case, you'll find that they might be somebody that came from overseas where they're not in possession of their own documents like a passport or visas because somebody else is holding them. Their movement, their speech, they appear to be under control by other people. They have no money, little or no compensation is paid to them. So you have to look at a lot of different aspects to try to make a determination as to whether or not this person is being trafficked. Laborers, they could be suffering from malnutrition, physical abuse, or not where they live, their living conditions. So you need highly trained individuals investigating these type of cases because they're very important. Make sure in this chapter that you take a good look at the Cleveland abductions. Very interesting case study, and I've had some tapes that I've included in our course materials that will support this chapter. That's the end of the professor comments for chapter 10.